In the early hours, one May morning in 1987, Kenneth Parks, who had fallen asleep in front of the TV, got up and drove 14 miles to his in-laws' house. There, he strangled his father-in-law unconscious and repeatedly stabbed his mother-in-law, who died. Parks then drove to a police station where he told officers that he thought he might have killed some people. Parks was charged with murder, but he pleaded not guilty, claiming to have no memory of the events between falling asleep and seeing his mother-in-law's frightened face. He said he'd been sleepwalking. He had a history of sleep disorders and he was under severe stress, which is a known trigger for sleep disorders. He was found not guilty, a judgment which was upheld by the Supreme Court in Canada. This fascinating case illustrates that we ordinarily tie both moral and legal responsibility to consciousness, in particular to our ability to exert conscious control over what we do. Clearly, Parks killed his mother-in-law. It was his hand, and no one else's, that wielded the knife. Yet his behaviour was not under his conscious control. He did not consciously decide to kill. His behaviour was produced in its entirety by automatic processes, the operation of which he was unaware. And for that reason, we recognise that Parks's behaviour should not be the target of moral blame. Now, Parks's case is unusual, but the presence of automaticity in human behaviour is not. All of our actions are subserved to some degree by automatic, unconscious cognitive processes. Sometimes this poses no threat to our control and responsibility. When I reach out to grasp a cup, the precise shape which my hand makes and the force of my grip are determined by the shape and weight of the cup which I'm picking up. If I gripped a half-full paper cup, the way I grip a full pint glass, I would crush it and spill its contents. But this control over the cup is automatic. It doesn't undermine the control that I, as a conscious subject, exercise, because the decisions through which I exercise control do not concern such fine details. I decide simply that I wish to pick up the cup. I don't decide whether to apply 0.2 or 0.3 newtons of force, and so on. There is some empirical evidence, however, that automatic, unconscious processes sometimes produce behaviour which we think we consciously decided to do. In one famous experiment, shoppers were asked to choose between pairs of nylon stockings and then to explain their choice. Most shoppers said things like, "I chose this pair of stockings because they were the softest pair." But this cannot have been true because, unbeknownst to the shoppers, all of the stockings were identical. So some automatic, unconscious process led them to choose a pair of stockings, and the shoppers then fabricated a reason for that choice. This kind of phenomenon undermines moral responsibility. In this theological puzzle, I look at a few such findings from neuroscience and psychology. I ask what implications they have for Christian systematic theology, which presupposes that humans are responsible for large parts of their behaviour. I conclude that in light of some of these findings, theologians should modulate the judgments they make about human responsibility, and that it's not unlikely that further findings will require further revisions to key theological claims which presuppose human responsibility and accountability before God.